And in case that's news,
Mhm.
my voice is like hoarse. Okay. Hello out there in the internet's world.
The
Can you hear us?
interwebs.
Are we there?
Hello.
Okay, it says we're live. Good enough. Okay, let's go, Brandon. Welcome to Legit Bat.
Ow!
And that is the sound of Biden shitting himself.
Come on, man.
Allegedly. We're not sure if he actually did, but he's
Doo-doo bud.
Yeah, doo-doo butt. We have the one and only Matt from the Great Deception podcast on tonight, and we're going to go over Star Forts. We promised this on the last time. Excuse me. Last time he was on, we said we'd schedule a part 2 of what the fuck happened, because we did not go too much into Star Forts, where it was more of a World's Fair type of thing, but everyone seems to love this subject right now, so we're going to do that. Matt, give us your plugs here at the top so we don't have to forget when we're drunk at the end.
How's it going, guys?
Good.
Okay, good.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, you can find me on the Great Deception podcast. Instagram is the Great Deception podcast. And I actually just yesterday got onto Alt Media United. So
Hell
you
yeah.
can find all my stuff on altmediaunited.com.
Fuck yeah. Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
If you're a first time listener, of course, I'm Joe and Jen is with me and
Hello.
Ben is picking his nose on screen.
Piss.
Thank you for that, Ben.
Was he really doing that? I wasn't looking.
It wasn't really a pick.
I went like this because I had something in my nose. Thank you, Tire Dust. And I like how after getting shit for it from fans, more or less trolls, it's now just the thing that gets pointed out.
Yeah. It's funny. At least you didn't eat it. I always say that. At least when you're picking it, you're not eating it.
Hey, I put in serious effort to stop eating my bugs.
When you were 5 or recently?
Oh no, totally recently, yeah.
Oh.
It's like in
Good to know.
Caddyshack where they're like, he's going to eat it. I bet you he's going to eat it.
Yeah, well, and like we've talked about it before, like when you're stuck at work and it's just asphalt and you have a bunch of shit in your nose, it's like, well, I can either pick it and wipe it, or I can go like this and use the farmer's Kleenex,
That's my favorite.
or I could just pick it and eat it.
Why would you eat it?
Yeah.
No.
Who gives a fuck? It's in my body already. It's just out one orifice and in the other.
Yeah, but it was
And,
being
like,
I made
filtered.
it.
There's a reason it didn't make it in your body. It's filtered so it didn't get in your body.
True.
It's just booger. It's dirt clumps, really, or tire dust clumps in your case.
It
And
would
it's
be like
just
shitting in your
mucus.
hand and taking a bite because it was already in your body. Like,
Well,
thank you.
this is the other way that I look at it. I have a post-nasal drip. So does Lorianne. I don't know if Joe, if you do. But it's like, yeah, it's constantly sucking in mucus anyway. So what's the difference if it goes backwards or just around?
Because it comes out. I think that's what it is. When it's already
Oh.
in, it's okay. The act of removing it and then replacing it into a different hole is gross. It just is.
Well, yeah, I have a post-nasal drip too, and it makes my tonsils all inflamed all the time. It sucks.
And it made me feel.
I got something else that comes out and goes in a different orifice.
Don't talk over my sound drops.
Doo-doo bud.
All
That's
right,
a-
let's get this going.
Okay. Also, if you're listening on audio, this is probably one you're going to want to watch. I keep it up on Rockfin for free for about a week or so, and then put it under premium. You got to pay for it, you fucks. You can go to Patreon too. We'll probably, depending on how long we go, put the second half of this on Patreon, so you can go there too. It's $3. I mean, come on, skip your Starbucks for a day. Give us $3. Anyway, Matt, let's get this started. Stop our nonsense. What do you got?
Right.
Let's start out with for anyone who doesn't know what they are, what Star Forts are, what the official story on what they are and what they do, and then we'll go into your wonderful information.
Yeah, so basically what it is Star Forts came around in, it's the, I guess you could say that the late 15th, early 16th century. And the narrative behind them is essentially they were built as defensive structures because the French and the Spanish were just going wild at sea and shooting cannons on ground, and we needed defense, right? And the original defense were castles. Well, castles are just basically a vertical wall that, you shoot cannonballs at them over and over again, they're going to break down. So what they did is they improvised, and actually one of the original designers was Michelangelo. He came up with these defensive earthwork concepts, and basically what it is taking, cymatic structures, and we'll get into that later too, but almost like snowflake designs for people that are trying to envision what we're talking about. And what he would do is he would angle them, right, and then make the walls thick, we're talking meters, yards thick. And so they were essentially impenetrable for the longest time, because when cannon fire would hit and they like to use red brick on the outside just because of the durability. So when you shoot cannons at it, it really wouldn't do a whole lot. So it took a lot to get into these things. Now, what they are is these extravagant landscaping where they build massive walls. I mean, some of these walls are 45 feet high on the perimeter. And then what they'll do is they'll layer it. They'll put a layer of wall, then like a trench or a moat of some sort, then probably another layer of wall. And then within that is whatever you're trying to fortify, whether it's a city, a tower, whatever it may be. It may even be landscape. But yeah, so basically they created these structures. And the fascinating thing, and what everybody and the historical records say is they were strictly defensive structures. And so as we go through these things, and you start seeing the pictures and all the work that it takes. Now, mind you, again, we're talking the 16 and 1700s when these things, first started coming about. And when we look at these things, think about it. It just doesn't make any sense. The architecture involved, the precision involved, and we're going to get a lot of aerial views so you can see the whole fort.
Which they did not have at the time, at least so we're told, at the time that they would have made these. They did not have the availability to see from above to be able to get those blueprint exact precision architecture correct, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, not that we know of, right? I mean,
right.
You get into the 1800s and, we've heard, we know there were airships and things like that. So they had a little bit more of a possibility to get an aerial view. But back in the 15th and 16th century, as far as we know, there was no air travel. So, other than Michelangelo's inventions that he was messing around with.
They didn't have balloons back then?
Not that we can find, no.
Because I mean, I guess that would have taken the invention of gas, I should say, was it helium that they use?
Yeah.
Yeah, they would have had to use helium and, figured out the apparatus of one, containing it, two, controlling it. So I don't know when they came out with hot air balloons, but I knew it was a lot farther back than any other kind of aerial ship that we have.
Yeah. The narrative's going to tell you that the airships came around in like the 1800s. So this is way, we're talking about 150, 200 years prior to that. So yeah, and that's another great point, Ben, because when you look at these, aside from the manpower required, the skill required, how are these made so precisely, right? Without any technology that we know about, without any aerial views. I mean, these guys just must have been the most amazing land surveyors ever, because these structures are they'll blow your mind.
Yeah. Just the few pictures I looked up today to make the banner for the show, I was like, how are and they're all over the place too, right? Aren't they all over the world?
That's the other thing, Joe. Yeah, they're all over the world. It's not like you're just going to find them in Europe. You're going to find them in Asia, Africa, Australia, the United States, South America. I mean, they're all over the world. And that's what's even more interesting is kind of like the World's Fairs that we went over last time. You see similar architecture in places that, obviously there's some communication, there's some travel between the sites, but not direct lines of communication. So you're having these things pop up in all these places around the world, and, there's really no communication.
Is there any documented recording of who created them? Is anyone claiming to say, I built this?
Well, the original credit is kind of given, the design of it was given to Michelangelo. There's some people in the 16th century that I'll name. One was Alcazar Peruzzi, another guy named Scamozzi, and another guy named like Florento or Flormento, something like that. It's basically the Italians that are credited with doing this.
They're credited with it, or is there anything documented though that shows? I mean, I don't know how they did real estate back in the day, but
Yeah,
is there any sort of recording of who owns the property or who built it? Any sort of like building documents?
there's there's some drawings that I'll show you, but again, we're relying on historical documentation, right? Which we've learned is suspect at best at times, and whoever they want to give the credit to they will get the credit. And
documents don't lie.
No,
Yeah.
I'm saying because I definitely think aliens made them or something else. I don't think people did it.
Well,
So
they're
I'm
kind of
just
similar to the crop circles, right, Jen? I mean, in the fact that they're all over the world. We hear people actually accept that they, will say that they built them. You're not gonna find that, one night they went to sleep, the next day they woke up and there was a star fort outside. But at the same time, you're right. As to who were the builders, there are some people that take credit for them. And after the Italians initially got this going in the 1500s, the French hopped on board real quick and started importing Italians to do it in France. And it kind of spread out from there, is what the narrative goes.
To go back to what you were talking about with the land ownership and stuff, I mean, stake your claim is a saying for a reason. I do know that at least back when it was still monarchies and kingdoms and things of that nature, rivalry kingdoms would set up borders to what they've agreed on was their kingdom's land area. And if I'm not mistaken, that is where the original writing of deeds came in. Mostly for noblemen and other stuff, they would give them a sequestered piece of property that they would claim as their own. And everybody's seen the movies and read the stories. They would collect the taxes off of the land, this, that, and the other. However, when you're talking about star forts of this magnitude, I would assume that would either be where like a chancellor or a king himself would be. Did you end up I know we'll probably get into it. Did you end up unearthing any of the proprietors of these star forts?
No, not yet. And let me be honest with you. I've been looking at these things maybe 2 months right now.
Sure.
So this is kind of the part one of this. I kind of want to give like a high overview for people who've never heard of them as to, what the general story is and what the different types are and things like that. And next is the deep dive where I start going more into, like you're saying, the historical nature of it.
Part 3.
Yeah. Like Jen was saying, who is getting credit for these? When were they built? Where were they built? How did they go about building them? Was it, and you'll see some of these are entire cities. So, a lot of it was ordered by the kings. And when we start looking at some of the layouts of them, a lot of them are on borders of the nations. So, and ironically, if you look at where the English put them, they were blocking basically France. Well, France basically set them up so they had a ring around their whole country. And then you look at Spain, and Spain was basically protecting itself from France and then anyone who would come from the Italian side of Spain. So it's kind of interesting how these things lay out. And then you look at the US and it's strictly East Coast based. I mean, there's one or two out west that, and again, when we say that, these are the ones that have been identified and really called out, and almost, I don't want to say a daily basis because that's an exaggeration, but on a regular basis, they're uncovering more of these with people just doing simple Google Earth searches and looking at the landscape today. And you can see a couple points and be like, okay, that was a star fort at one time. They've obviously built over it. And so they're popping up, and, the number varies of star forts that exist today from between 1,500 and 6,000. So, I mean, you're all over the place. And then some people would even say there were upwards of 10,000 at the peak of these. So
Wow.
they're all over, and they're all in over 60 countries around the world. So you can find them just about, one out of every 3 countries that are out there.
So from what you've been able to see, though, it does look as though they were the first line of defense against an invasion from a neighboring country, correct?
Yeah, if we're going to go strictly the defense route, on the other route, it could be some sort of grid system, right? I mean, if we're talking lining them up on one coast, well, maybe you are trying to set them up in a defensive manner from an energy standpoint to align your energy on that coast also. So
Have you
yeah,
found them on like ley lines or like the ley line convert, whatever you call them when they join together. Have you looked into that at all yet?
That's one of the things I'm diving into next. And I'm actually reading a book right now. It's called the Sacred Network, and it looks into the ley lines in France and how a lot, if not all, of the major buildings, cathedrals, forts are laid out on ley lines. So there is starting to see some connection there. Now, on the other side of it, a lot of these star forts, or the majority of the star forts, are water-based, right? They have some connection or close proximity to water. And one of the other theories that's out there is that they were all at one time surrounded or directly related to water. And one of the ways to cut them off was to cut off their water. So we'll see some of those too, that at one time they would have been lush and green, and now it looks like a desert because there's no water to the area anymore at all.
Huh. They're like defunct power stations, if we want to go down that hole.
Yeah, it seems like it's left over from a civilization previous to us.
That's why it ties in so good to Tartaria.
Yeah,
and
it does. And the
everything
empty
else we talked
cities
about.
and
Yeah,
much
it's one of those, you can go with the narrative, right? That they were strictly defensive, they were for cannons. And then as soon as they started developing, more explosive rounds and airplanes came in, they said they were useless. But you also see the date come up again of 1812, and how before 1812, there seemed to be a lot more star forts. And then around 1812, the star forts start to disappear or, be destroyed, be disconnected in a sense. So it all ties into that, old world being destroyed. And I feel like, much like the buildings in the World's Fair, these things they were more important than just defensive batteries. And they were part of that Earth grid.
Ties right into that documentary, even the time frame of it. If 1812 was the start, by 1860s, you start seeing people in the pictures. It all kind of adds up to exactly what Joe was saying.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. And in that documentary, he touches on star forts for a good 10, 15 minutes. And it does. I mean, when we start looking at them, and we'll talk about cymatics a little bit too, which is, the influence of sound and vibration on whether it be sand, whether it be water, and that possibility. So yeah, I want to look at a couple different things, because I honestly, I don't know what they were used for, but I have some ideas, and I have some, assumptions that I want to throw out there that for people to consider, or a thesis, so to speak, and see where it goes.
Let's go then.
Hey, they were just for protecting people from cannons, dude.
Yes.
Okay.
Trust the science.
Case closed. Show's over, everybody. We're going home.
All
right. Let's get going with your slides, though. Yeah, throw those up there. I think I okayed it for you to. I don't even know if I can.
Mine says it's okay.
Just try it.
Yeah. So. Here, okay. Let's see. Okay. Yes.
Oh. There we go.
Here we go.
Oh shit.
Oh. Okay. So here is the layout, okay, of the world. And you'll see majority are in Europe here. East coast of the United States has a heavy presence. Most of those were built in the 1800s from what the records say. But then, I mean, you can go over to Japan, you can go down to Australia, you can look in Africa, you can look in South America, and there's even some in Hawaii.
There is a gaggle in America.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, supposedly they built 91 of them in the 1850s alone.
Bullshit.
Right.
Probably in
Yeah,
like 9
right.
months.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
here's another map
Overnight
that'll
construction.
kind of blow your mind as to this combines some of the old structures too, to
Mhm.
kind of show you, they have star forts marked, they have bastion forts, which it's just another name for a star fort. It depends how you want to categorize it. But the interesting thing here is you start seeing in the US, you start seeing a little bit more out west than you saw before. And then you look over here to Russia, and that let me bounce back real quick, because if you look at this map, look what they did to Russia, or what used to be known as Tartaria. They show nothing. There's absolutely zero out there. But yet you come over to this map, which tracks them also, and you're starting to see some. And if you look to Eastern Russia, you start to see a lot of stuff. So
am I mistaken in how I'm looking at this? It does appear to be that they're in that area, kind of the bridge between Lower Asia and the rest of Western Europe. A lot more of the cathedrals, or as they were talking about the documentary, energy storage places, arches, and that type of thing. From the map here, it looks like there's a whole lot more of those cathedrals and shit.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, they're all over the realm. But if you look, Europe is going to be heavy with them early, and the Middle East also, surprisingly. And a lot of those were cathedrals at one time, and they were changed to mosques. So, again, and cathedrals is a whole nother rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Because some of those are said to have just been co-opted by the Catholic Church and taken over, when in reality they were originally healing centers. So, and that goes back to frequency and all that fun stuff.
Which would explain why there's so goddamn many of them, because, I mean, who really needs that many churches? Like, you can just pray to God out in a field. You don't need to go into this place. It makes
and if you think about it now, Joe, you tie it to like 5G, right? They would just be 5G towers that are all around. And in order to make sure the signal goes, you got to have more towers. So they would build these churches or whatever structures they needed, and it would bounce the signal.
Huh.
Let's
Except
see.
5G is the devil. That's the
yeah, well, that's different. And that's the difference, though. This used the earth and earth energy to benefit not only the ethereal energy to not only benefit the people and the land, whereas today we're just doing it as a detriment. We're taking from the land and not giving anything back, and in fact probably poisoning it. So, and this is
I
just
don't know, that civilization isn't there anymore, so maybe they were doing it wrong too.
Could be.
That's actually something that I've kind of been mulling over, is the idea that, and to me it makes sense, all of this cover up that we've been seeing for the last 100 to 150 years, say, let's, for theory's sake, say post Tartarian mudslide. My idea is that they had tapped into something, they figured out how to use it, then they abused it, and in a way the earth fought back. And what they did was they tried to cover up the history so that it never happened again.
That would make sense. And that would explain, that would tie in with the Romanovs getting rid of the Tartarians and all that stuff.
The Rockefeller and everything from 1890, which again is roughly 30 years from all the orphan trains, and the 1860 when they started seeing people again in the pictures, and the summit of 1890 between the Zionists and basically the world leaders. The more that I hear about this, and the idea of combining the multiple ideas of flat earth, ethereal energy, and the containment or absorption and containment and usage of it, and then all of the dates that end up lining up, to me it seems more like it was a catastrophe brought on by human nature, and they said, how the fuck are we going to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Yeah. Oh, I would say so too. I mean, it was just it's an absolute destruction, and there's no two ways around it. I mean, you look at the different wars that took place that just leveled cities, and there's really no explanation. And or even the fairs. You look at the fairs; they built exquisite buildings only to tear them down right after the fair. That it just doesn't make any sense.
Right. That is absolutely gorgeous, by the way.
So what we're looking at now, up above, is the list of the countries that have star forts in them. There's about 60 countries listed up here. Down below, we have what is called a 5-pointed star. Okay, and this is from Copenhagen, Denmark. And what you'll notice is there's usually an original star fort, so to speak, on the inside, and then around it would tend to be where the water is. Okay, and then what they would do outside the water is build another structure, and that was usually where they used even more earth, and they would build these angled walls to make it very hard to get in.
And supposedly back when these would have been made before the evolution of cannons, they were still using ballistas and trebuchets and catapults. If they had that much distance, but you have the original wall of the star fort, then you have the water, then you have an additional wall, and then you have additional water. And my guess is based on this layout, they were more worried about it coming from the north. If you had that, it'd be almost impossible to get trebuchets and any kind of lobbed projectile all the way over into the inside of the star fort
with any accuracy. Yeah, I mean, you could lob it blindly and hope to hit something, but
hope to fuck shit up.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to illustrate here too is you have one from Denmark and one from Japan. They're both 5-sided, but they vary slightly, right? And that's what you'll see. There rarely will you see, and I have yet to see 2 star forts that are identical. Every one has a different feel to it, but again, you go back and they look like snowflakes to people who are listening. They have a very snowflake appearance, and they're precise. It's not sloppy. The corners, everything is measured out precisely. The inside of it is laid out with the facilities and whatever else you need precisely. And again, they're doing this in the 15 and 1600s with very limited technology that we know about. So
the one similar thing is that, oh wait, go back to that one real quick. I just wanted to point out that little area with the detached triangle, that looks really similar to the one in Japan at the bottom. See that?
Yes, and those are called Ravenels. And yeah, they're more of a defensive. That's where you would have some sort of either a manned area where they're watching, is what the story is, right? And that's where your first line of defense would be, and that's usually where the entrance is to the star fort as well.
Gotcha.
And because you'll see here, you see the little road connecting it in on this side, and then on the bottom here you'll see the road, and usually there's 1 to 2 ways into these things, but there's also a massive amount of underground work under these as well. We're talking, they say up to or more than 50% of the structure is underground as well, between tunnels and labyrinths. Now, when I think of tunnels, I'm thinking of Vietnam with these little rat tunnels, where these guys are down, crunched, crawling through. No, we're talking some of these tunnels had 16, 17 foot high ceilings. So
I'm
we're
starting
talking.
to think there's a lot more of that than we ever would have thought possible. We talked about that probably last time with the New York City, like half of it being underground. That's probably all over the place. And if you think mud flood thing and everything just got submerged with the soil liquefaction or whatever that's called all at once, there's probably a whole other world underneath of us.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Kansas City, Missouri is another example. I mean, there's so many tunnels under Kansas City. It's ridiculous. They drive trucks under Kansas City into some of the tunnels.
There's a whole thing on, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, for these star forts, are they, obviously it's not called star fort. What's it called? I mean, is it still functional? Is it labeled as a landmark? Can you visit it now? Or is it used by military or someone currently? The one in Japan looks pretty abandoned, but the one in Denmark looks like it could be used.
Yeah, they vary. A lot of them were used by military up until they were decommissioned, and then they become like a tourist attraction or a historical monument type deal.
Okay.
There's a lot actually in New York State that you can go visit. You can take tours of them and things like that. I actually have been to one. I didn't know. My parents told me about it, so we went when we were younger. And but yeah, so most of them are still open. And you can kind of tour the grounds. Now, whether you can get inside the star fort itself, I don't know. It probably varies, but there are many that you can visit and go look at.
Huh.
That's interesting. Did they use the word Star Fort when they're talking about it on the little plaques they have outside?
They're
If it's a
usually called
monument?
bastion forts.
Bastion forts. Okay.
Yeah, that's the usual name. Star fort's
That's
kind of
the
like the new
official
term for
narrative
them.
name.
Yeah.
So really quick before we continue getting into this, I thought I just looked it up because I wanted to make sure. In St. Augustine, Florida, we used to live in Jacksonville, and we traveled the 2.5 hours down to St. Augustine. Now, supposedly, there's a fort called El Castillo de San Marco. It is also one of these star forts. I don't know if you guys can kind of see it in this picture,
Nope.
but we went there, and we were actually able to go and view everything on it. Supposedly, I think they said it was erected in like 1610 or something. I'll have to look it up for sure, but that's the only one that I've been able to visit. And at the time that I visited it, well, let's just say my third eye wasn't even available for viewing. So all I saw was, I was like, that's cool. That was
You
it.
hadn't taken the bat to your forehead yet. You're welcome.
No.
Sorry, Matt.
Wow.
We rabbit trail all the time. Go do your thing. You're way better at
Okay.
it.
No, I was just trying to see if I could find that one Ben was talking about. No, and basically this is just kind of an overview. Here's another example of one. Like I was saying before, Michelangelo is given the credit for them. One of the interesting quotes that I found was, though, the Renaissance was hypnotized by one city type, which for a century and a half was impressed upon all utopian schemes. This is the star-shaped city. Say that 3 times fast. But yeah, so even back then in the Renaissance, they thought these were high tech, right? These were some fascinating structures. And like we were saying, there's no 2 star forts that are the same. They all tend to vary in shape and size. Whether they use the same sort of layout, whatever they're being used for tends to vary. And, again, they're a natural structure, right? They're working with nature. I mean, we look at this one over on the left-hand side, and it's just an absolute work of art. I mean,
That's baller, dude.
Yeah, it's in a peninsula, and you have a octagon with, 8 points coming off, 8 bastions coming off the tips, and you can see how it integrates with the land around it.
One way in, one way out. That is absolutely gorgeous. Where is this one at?
I believe that one is it's either it's over in Europe. It's either the Netherlands or Belgium area.
That is fucking gorgeous. That I would have to say that's probably the coolest one that I've, at least from this view, that I've seen, because most of them, like we've talked about, being surrounded by water and whatnot. Okay, true. Not to that extent. That almost looks like a miniature Dubai.
Well, and think about this, Ben. How did they make that? Right? How did they build that at the time with the materials and construction that they had? The technology was, they're out in the middle of the water.
Yeah, how the fuck did they get all?
Lots of slaves, obviously.
Rope and pulleys. Duh, it's so easy.
What were they doing? Dragging big ass, pond scrapers behind their boats to move all that dirt? Like, what?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, and that's one of the big questions: is how did they landscape these? How did they do all the excavation? Because we're talking massive amounts of land being moved, and being moved precisely, right? This one up here on the top right-hand side, I just put that in because that was essentially a castle that they modified with a star fort, right? They modified the landscape around it. It was a castle up on a hill. To fortify it a little better, you'll see they put the star fort there, and that, is obviously strictly defense right there, but again, could be energy.
Well, like that one right below that, the castle looking one. Besides the actual fort with that thick green wall, then there's those thin walls. Oh, you probably can't see my cursor on it. I'm pointing to it, but it's those squiggly lines around the outside that looks like lightning bolts.
Yep. Yeah, and those and that's how they do it, right? There's layers to these. And it, again, it could be defensive, right? You're delaying people being able to get in, but look at the positioning of this, right? You're in a bay, you're on the water. I don't understand why you would be defending the land side, right? And that's what doesn't make any sense in some of these, is that the heavy fortification is on the land side. And if these are defensive, supposedly for cannon fire, why would they be coming to attack that way? It just, the story doesn't add up.
Well, the only thing that I could think of, and of course this is playing devil's advocate on common sense, is the idea that it was a major trading post. That's where they would dock, and therefore they needed some kind of fortification from any kind of would-be pirates or anything like that to try to come and take any of the merchant ships or any of that stuff. But even still, that seems way more extravagant than just fortifying a coastline like normal people were doing.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. And so, yeah, this is what they had before the Star Forts, right? They had the old style castles,
right?
Which basically you would be up on a hill and you'd be flinging arrows down and using the trebuchet to throw it up. And really the only hope of getting in there was to get a ladder and get up over the walls or siege the gate and get in. So what they did is on the left-hand side, this is their first attempt at, the modification. So if you look at this structure where it's grass, in all likelihood, it would have been water at one time. And this is one of those where you start looking at it and reading about it, and they definitely drain the water to this area, because you start seeing around it, there's some very dry vegetative areas that would have been lush back in the day. And so they tried, but what they were using were these rounded structures around the outside, which weren't as conducive to defense. They offered up what's called dead zones, and we'll talk about that in a minute here. But yeah, this was the precursor to Star Forts. And then we move on and we get into the Star Forts. And on the left here, we have their first attempt. So what they did is they had a moat. They decided to build the star around it. You'll see the bastion point coming out over here. And they're built out of red brick, which is very conductive, as we've learned. You'll see there's a little bridge down here to get in. You have to go through the brick wall to even get close to the structure itself and get across the moat. Now, on the other side of the river, like Joe pointed out before, you have another wall with a similar star-shaped pattern offering another line of defense. So it's, and what they did is they innovated these things, right? You'll look at this one on the right here, and this is a work of art. I mean, again, it's basically an island surrounded by water. You have the bastion points coming out, and then you have even Ravenels out in the middle of the water. Okay, you have these perfectly shaped structures just in the middle of the water. How did they build that? That's what I'm trying to figure out, because I mean, that would be a work of art by today's standard. And well, again,
I think the idea is that, like we saw on the last slide, where they've dug out the trench without the water, this would have all been completely built in the middle of a landmass, and then they would have dug out to the sea to fill it up with water.
In all likelihood, yeah. Okay. That's the only way it seems plausible, right, Ben? I mean,
yeah, it's not like they can make islands in the middle of the water like they can today with all of the technology.
I was just going to say the same thing, Ben. Like, I agree with you 100%. It's like when you build a sandcastle at the beach, you build the whole castle and you build the moat, and you do it when the tide's coming in, and then it fills up the moat and then fills in that whole wall that you've made.
Right.
Or the little ditch you made to make a wall.
Right. And like he said, just like with sandcastle, that would have been the only way to do it with rudimentary tools. Yep. I mean, but even still, like the precision, you're talking about what should have been years of erosion, that if all they were doing was, I mean, unless they dug it all out and then also fortified those little islands from the bottom of the moat up to the top where the landmass is at with brick or something of that nature, islands.
They are brick, Ben. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
And around the sides here, you can see that these are brick structures that go below the water there.
That's how they kept the shape then.
Yes. And
that's crazy. Do you have a age range on this one on the right? Because that one's fucking amazing looking.
Yeah, it is.
That's probably a mid 1600s right there.
Bullshit.
I feel like these are sandcastles of the giants, though. Like maybe a giant race was around then, and they were just building these things, and it was very easy to them. And they could make it super intricate. and it wasn't hard because they were huge. It was like building a dollhouse or a sandcastle or something like
Because
that.
these are acres of campus, Jen. You're right. I mean, we're not talking about like on the left here, it's one castle, right? That may be 2 to 3 acres worth of land. The one on the right-hand side, that's probably 15 to 20 acres right there.
It looks like a whole little town. I kind of want to live there.
Oh, yeah, it looks beautiful. Well, until the
Yeah, I
bridge
want
goes
one.
down. Then you're stuck there. So
I'm okay with that too.
so what they want, were they expensive? Yes, these were extremely expensive to build. A, in manpower, and B, cost, right? Because you needed the materials, you needed someone with the skill to be able to not only design, but to craft it, to excavate it, to do the brickwork, everything. It wasn't like a one-man crew. I found a list right before I was hopping on, and I couldn't throw it in, but they said they would need upwards of 20 to 30 different titles of people just to get these jobs done, from planning to execution to the landscaping at the end.
And those are just the people in charge.
No workers, just the people kind of designing and running the show. It would take 20, experts essentially. And, I mean, you're looking at this one on the right in the Netherlands, and it's a star within a star within a star. And it's just a beautiful landscape, perfectly designed. It's precise. It flows with the land. I mean, it's just a beautiful structure. And basically what I'm saying here is that the reason and their idea as to why these things went out was because of artillery shells and airplanes. And once they came in, they said these were useless because they were just easy targets.
Right.
But if you look at it back in their time, if you look at these walls here, what you'll notice is not only are they angled back, but they're extremely tall. I mean, you're talking minimum of 15 to 20 feet. Some of them are upwards of 45 to 50 feet high.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you just look at the houses and structures on the inside and compare for size, those walls easily go above the roofs.
Yes. Yep.
And I guarantee that much like anything else you'd see inside of a courtyard in a castle, those roofs are probably at least 2 or 3 stories tall.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're not talking about just, a 1-story house here. These are buildings.
Right.
Yeah. So what I was talking about before was the dead zones, and you'll see that here. There's a difference between when they decided to go with the bastion and the diamond pointed. It eliminates all of that area there where it's a dead zone from a defensive purpose. So that was one of the additions they made, is that they could cover this dead space between the 4 bastions. Whereas in the old layout, if they were rounded, it would leave them 4 blind spots essentially. And what they would do is they would use the ditches, use the landscape to channel the troops where they wanted them to go, essentially, to make it easily defensible.
Here's a question. Based on what you've been able to research, do you believe that they started from the inside and worked their way out, or from the outside and worked their way in?
It's usually the inside out.
And then they would construct the multiple star layers around it?
Yeah, from what I've seen. And there's actually one that we'll get into in a little while in Italy, where you'll see there was one layer was done in, I believe, the 1500s. The second layer was done in the 1600s, and the third layer was done in the 1800s. And so it sounds like they, generally they would build the inside, then go out and work that way. So here's kind of a layout of the terminology, right? And we were talking before about those structures that are away from the fort itself, and those are called the Ravenels. The points is the bastion, and you'll hear that term a lot. Other than that, there's not too much that's really important. These side structures over here, this one's called a crown work, essentially because it does look like a crown. It has that crown shape. And the other structure that they would call is a horn work, because if you look at it, it has 2 points and it kind of looks like a horn. And those are really the major structures that tie in with the Star Fort. And around it, obviously, you're going to have some sort of moat or ditch that would act as a barrier as well.
In the chat, they're saying Justin is saying they each have their own resonant frequency, sacred geometry. It is very fucking similar to sacred geometry and mandalas and all that kind of stuff too. And to make a whole fortress out of that, it's gotta be something to
Yeah,
it.
do you think they could have created something that was so powerful that it, because they were built in the one of them that you showed us, it was in the center of what they would have been protecting, not on the edge. So they could create a barrier outward from that, since it's a circle. I mean, it's a star, but it's a circular structure at the end of the day, and they could create a barrier around the city with whatever frequencies they were projecting.
Well, yeah, and one of the things that you'll see in Autodidactic is a YouTube channel. They do a great job on this. And I was actually watching one of his videos last night where he goes on Google Earth and he'll zoom into the ones that how they look today. And one of the things you see repeatedly is the way that these things are designed. They usually point to, like this one would have the city in the middle, but obviously there's going to be some stuff on the outside too, right? There's going to be other towns around it and things around it. So it looked like on some of them that it may have been, you know, it may appear to be a water-based defensive system, but in reality, the points of the fort are pointing back out towards the town. So to your point, Jen, if they are some sort of resonating or energy frequency, they're going to be pushing that out towards the townspeople. And
That actually,
yeah,
but that actually makes perfect sense though, especially with that same documentary talking about, you know, the inside of the cities having archways more as like a I forget what the
Like a
little-
magnet or like a
a
conductive.
capacitor. Yeah.
yes,
And like
yes.
having the archways as capacitors, the gazebos as more of like a battery station or the lighthouses and things that he was talking about. And then you have the cathedrals with multiple spires, which now have been adorned with crosses or this, that, and the other. That would actually make perfect sense, because if most of these star forts are on the edge or they're in the center, whatever city would have been the common people's city, it would make sense to push energy that they were receiving from the water, which is the important part there, right? Pushing that energy from the water that it's collected basically as a booster signal straight into these capacitors and the things that could hold the energy for the main people's town. I think Jen was actually spot on with that. And if it was pointing towards towns that were of bigger nature and housed the common people away from the defensive structure, it'd make a whole lot more sense to be able to receive that ethereal energy from the water and push all of it straight into the townspeople.
Ben, listen to you talking ethereal
Ew,
energy.
ethereal energy.
Who is this guy?
But that would make sense that maybe that's why the civilization was destroyed. I'd like to think they had good intentions. Like, okay, maybe it wasn't even good. I shouldn't even say that, but they were trying to build some sort of defense system. Like our government currently is trying to build some worldwide network of 5G shit. And they're like, it's so great, everybody. Everyone's on board with this. Okay, it's a defense system. It's great. And then it just destroyed them somehow. We're not even sure because we don't know how it all worked. But
Well,
Or
like
all of a sudden-
Starlink, right? That could be a perfect example. It's supposed to help humanity, but you got to get a brain chip to make it work, you know?
Well, and the idea that all of a sudden they became obsolete because planes came in, they could drop bombs into the center of it, doesn't take away. That sounds like a perfect defensive cover up to what would actually be. Because why in the world would they abandon it if it was the actual idea of what we're talking about with being able to generate energy into a town? They would be trying to defend that at all costs, regardless of what was created to destroy it. They would be trying to come up with something, unless they wanted the availability of pushing the energy to go away because of a catastrophe.
Yeah,
Huh?
it's your infrastructure. You're going to protect it till death. Yeah, absolutely.
are all the mechanics removed though? Is anything below, anything that would collect the energy? Has that been discovered at all? Is
Well,
anyone looking for
there's
that?
tunnels underneath, Jen. Like I said, there's in most of these, at least 50% of the structure is below ground, including aqueducts, you know, water tunnels. Not only were they used for people and for moving supplies in and out and for, you know, living quarters, but also, yeah, they're finding, you know, aqueducts under there that would move water around. And, that is essentially, water is one of the greatest conductors out there.
But any sort of device that would hold the electricity or to generate the electricity from the water, and store it and then project it up through whatever spires they had or whatever they had. I don't know.
No,
I know
not
in the documentary, they were talking about how everything was removed from all the spires that would have projected any sort of electricity. I do remember that, but there must be something from the water or in the bottom too. It's just like a circuit. There's a part in every,
Yep.
there's little pieces throughout the whole thing that make it all work. So just that part being removed from the top wouldn't make sense. It would all have to be removed.
Those spires weren't made to give out the energy. They were antennas to receive it, much like you have grounding rods at the top of the spires at churches.
I mean, that was their theory. We don't know.
It was no, I'm saying from the documentary, it wasn't to put out the energy, it was to receive it. That way it could then, from those cathedrals that had those spires, which now have crosses on them, the idea is that if it could absorb the energy and then displace it into the rest of the circuitry and be housed in the arches, that would be a way for all of those antennas to connect based on where the energy inputs were coming from the spires.
Gotcha.
Which
So
is
that would be for
bananas.
that. Yeah, that is crazy. So this would have to have I mean, in my head, I'm thinking of these as a defense thing now, but it doesn't mean it's right. But if they were going to project it out, they'd have to collect
Oh, I'm sorry. That was
They'd
Oh my God.
Okay.
wrong button. Sorry.
Ooh, whatever.
I did not-
Yes.
Yes.
Anyway, they'd have to collect the energy from the water and then project it out with whatever defensive barrier. And I don't know if
Well,
there's
yeah,
any
and that's
other
where they say the
devices
shape,
that are in there.
they say the shape has a lot of play in it, right? The shape and the structures that are within. So if you look at this one here from Portugal, this is one that's up on a mountain, and you can even see that they've, manicured the mountain in a way that it models the Star Fort itself with angled walls. And we're talking here probably, I don't know, 60, 70 foot climb right there.
And that's without any gigantic earth movers or backhoes or anything.
Yeah,
Wow.
that we know of. Yeah, absolutely. And so you look at it, and if what I wanted to show is this first picture up here. What you would tend to see is that you would think that the energy would flow away, right? You see how everything's pointing to the right here. And
Yeah.
that's what they're saying, is they would direct that energy in that way. Now you would get energy coming out from the other bastion points as well, because of the whole geometry of the shape, but the majority of it would be going in a direction. And what this is basically showing, though, is there's different types everywhere. This one on the bottom right here is a giant 6 or 8 pointed star from India. And, it looks very similar to the structure that they have in Portugal, or, they have these half ones where it's built on the water. Like if you look at this top one, it looks like it's missing the top half, which may have been destroyed and fallen into the water, or the water level rose and overtook it. So that's one of the things they're finding now on Google Maps also, is that a lot of these things have either been destroyed or buried in some way or another. And as we start to uncover it, you start to see the bigger picture of some of these forts.
Well, So if you
Go
one
ahead.
of the things that strikes me is that it's so much effort, especially back then when they're using ropes and pulleys and donkeys to construct these things. It's so much fucking effort to make these. I mean, I guess if that's your life and you're trying to protect yourself, from cannons and shit, then you would be willing to do that. But it seems like a fuckload of work to make it in these
It would take
exact
a
shapes.
lifetime. I mean,
Yeah, and that's one of the
Well,
things
now,
I'm trying
yeah.
to find, and good luck trying to find it. Much like the World's Fair, I am unable to find anything so far on the actual construction of these. And I'm going to keep digging until I do find something. But yeah, from a time perspective, how long did it take to build these things? Because you're talking about a massive undertaking here, again, with no modern tools. So yeah, it would take even with a large workforce, it's going to take a lot of time to do these.
Well, I think if the idea that you could literally manifest a civilization, this now is bringing back a whole lot of older idea of historicism, where people are branching out to go out and conquest or find a new land. And now you have a central location where it starts, they figure it out in Europe, and all of a sudden it starts branching out. But obviously, as anything branches out, you're going to start seeing it petering off as people continue to kind of leapfrog away. Everybody's going to want to have their own energy source. Everybody's going to want to have the highest sophistication of defensive, which, whether either one or both of those in erecting one of these things, you would want that for your civilization. If you're trying to go out and start your own civilization, you're going to want whatever the best technology or profitable or healthy thing is that is at that time what people are doing to connect to that energy and really push it into a civilization that you're trying to bring. And if everybody was doing it at that point, everybody would be on board, including the donkeys.
And that's one of the conclusions that I've seen people make, is that these were part of a larger network, right? Of something that's been destroyed. And over time, now you're left with remnants of it, and trying to piece it back together makes it a lot more difficult because you don't have the full picture. So you have to, find and unlock these missing pieces to get to show the whole picture of the grid in its entirety. Like
a broken and water damaged motherboard, trying to piece it all together. Once you break one of the diodes or one of the circuits, the whole thing goes and it's done. And the magic electrical smoke that happens when things break, it goes away. They're talking about that in the comments right now about most of these all being around ley lines, and we talked about that in the beginning, the idea that all of these were somehow interconnected. I would like to point out, though, and I explained this to my girlfriend, is that she was saying, well, why would they have all of those spires and things like that nature? I said, well, take into consideration the idea of flat Earth, because in that documentary, that's what it was gearing towards, was flat Earth, correct? Instead of a globe where you would have spires pointing out of different directions, if everything was flat and all of those spires were pointed up, and you're talking about a realm and more of a dome in that way with the idea of flat Earth, all of those things would be pointed up at different levels around the realm, and they would all be being connected to whatever it is that is being shared within that flat and domed ether that would be going around. It would make a whole lot more sense with the idea of this energy that flat Earth was something to entertain by this alone, assuming that this is what they were actually using it for, like a circuit board.
I'm going to have to sample that sound bit. Our flat stationary realm. So we're told.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, Ben, because in that book, The Sacred Network, that I was reading, and it's the first time I've heard of this because I'm not very scientific. I'm kind of getting into it by like swallowing on a fire hose. But one of the things that they said is that there's two waves of ethereal energy. It's called, you'll love this, the A spot, which is the above ground wave, which tends to flow longer and more in a wave pattern, like a natural sine pattern. It'll go up and down. So if it gets to a building, it'll hit the building, it'll go up the building, over it, and then down, and keep going with the landscape. Whereas then you have the G spot, which is the ground based, which is either at ground level or below ground level. And that wave will go in a straight line. It's direct. So when it hits something, it's either going to go through it or it's going to stop.
Right.
Sorry. Did I throw you off there? Sorry.
Well,
you were like, oh, I know this is
so
coming.
I was listening to his episode today, and I'm like, he's going to say G-spot.
So that also makes sense, though, because if you're actually talking about the idea of the flat realm, you would be talking about a centralized North Pole, right? And so with the way that the magnetism would work on a spinning disk versus a spinning globe, the idea of that energy transference would actually work a lot better with what you're talking about. And that's another whole other rabbit trail of the idea of that energy, almost like a centrifugal force or vortex being created and kept up, much like a Tesla tower or something of that nature, where you have a almost a generator inside spinning fast enough to actually create it. And once it's created its own, the natural magnetism, and in this case spires, which would be rotating all around, the centralized pole would actually continue that energy. If they created enough of them, you would almost have a surge, if you would, of energy, because they would have made enough of them to create its own energy field.
Well, and they say that's also why they had the water too around it, was for cooling purposes, right? Because if these things start getting hot, the water around them would help manage and contain the heat if it got, you got too much of energy at one spot. Now, again, it's speculation, but it makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. And that's part of what has been blowing my mind since we originally, was it Whiskey, Beer, and Conspiracies? Is that the right name of that podcast?
Yes.
Whiskey, Beer, and Conspiracies, when they were the ones that brought up that documentary. And he said within the first 45 minutes, he was, picking his soul back up off the ground to put back into his body. And all of us were kind of like, yeah, we've seen and talked about some weird shit. I don't know if it's going to be that bad. Well, what really got it was his presentation, because he took you on baby steps, baby journeys, and tied it all together at the end. But he did it all without it being a fucking close-up of his dumb face like mine. Instead, he showed slides and he showed evidence, all of which you can research on your own. That is what got me, because although I don't trust a lot of what you can see online, well, if that's all you can find online, or that's the only evidence you have to figure out something. And I have no doubt in my mind, they say history is written by the victors. I do believe that, with all of this being said, anything is possible. And this makes a whole lot more sense with the idea of primitive technology that we are told that they have versus what we're seeing here. It would make a lot more sense that, like a lot of people said, advanced technology in the ancient times versus what we have today.
Yeah, and the fact that they're multi-purpose, right? Why would you go through all the work of this just for defensive purposes? I mean, that is hard for me to believe, to go through that, intricate of detail and everything like that just for defensive purposes. I can't buy that. I really think there's more to it. And that's kind of what I put over here. Some of the things that I've seen, some people say it's an energy grid or a storage area for energy. Some say that the forts are for hydraulic engineering or water management, or to magnetize the water, to give it whatever star shape it has. Will emit that frequency, which will then go into the water, which can be used to heal people, or it can be used to benefit the landscape. Some are saying it could even be a communication grid, because obviously you're going to have frequencies traveling, and these could be connection points along some sort of communication grid, some sort of frequency or harmonic grid that has to do with amplification of sounds. It could be for efficient farming. As we'll see here, they have these field systems that are usually associated with these outside of these, or gardens. So it may have been, a benefit to the terra. Or this is one I put in there. Maybe it was a GPS of the past, right? Maybe they were navigational landmarks for airships or something that was overhead. Or the last one I saw was, could it just be a living biological organism? It's in tune with the earth. It's working together, and that one I think is a stretch. But
I don't necessarily think it's a stretch. If they were all based on ley lines, as well as we're talking about frequency, I think that actually both of those would go hand in hand. The idea of using the not grid, the layout or whatever, I can't think of the word, the way that it sat to create and erect these forts. I think that GPS would actually go perfectly into that, because how do we know that they didn't have something as simple as a compass that pointed you from one fort to the other as you got away from one energy and towards another, instead of using magnetism? It could have been something as simple as that, and that would guide you to the next fort instead of getting lost in the fucking woods like I would.
Yeah, or even from sea, right? If these were some sort of navigational points from sea. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Yeah, Ben, good point. Yeah, and like I've said before, again, some of the structures, and the picture on the right is a picture of the structure underground, not just these little tunnels. And they say about 50% of them could be, at least 50% is underground, in tunnels, mazes, storage areas, living quarters, aqueducts. There's all sorts of possibilities.
Look at that masonry.
Yeah.
That is absolutely incredible.
I was going to
It's
say
like-
that too. Look at the angles. It harkens back to the angles of cathodes and anodes or whatever they were talking about
Well-
with the cathedrals.
And look at the
And
top.
what did they make them out of? It's all red brick, right?
Mm.
Well, look at the center of that dome too. It's almost like obviously they didn't. I never mind. It's not obvious. Maybe they just made a brick float up at the top and then they built around from the brick floating at the top. I don't know, but it looks like they fucking built the top of that dome inside that mason rework. It looks like they started from the top and then built around it like this all the way to the rest of what you see.
Yep. And here's
Fucking crazy.
another one from inside. You know,
Oh.
this is a hallway in one of the, you know, underground tunnels. And you'll see it's not just some half-assed, you know, rat tunnel. These are immense tunnels that could house quite a lot of things, you know, whether it's supplies, armor, you know, if they're armories, whatever, you know, their possibilities are endless.
Right.
It looks like Squid Game tunnels.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought when I saw this. I was like, oh. So now we're going to get into the show you the different examples of star forts. This is a traditional 4-pointed one. Obviously, you got 4 bastions coming on the outside. And then again, you have another layer of defense around the outside that works with it. And then you have the center structure or the inner buildings that work alongside with it. You have a 5-pointed star, which we saw this is the one we showed on the first slide, one of the first slides in Denmark. Again, a 5-pointed star, you tend to have the moat around it. You know, this has 2 entry points, one on each side. Again, you have the Ravelin on the outside. And, you know, it's right on the water. So
It's so funny to see that beautiful thing from the past, apparently. So
next to a highway.
next to all these ugly ass grid like straight lines of nasty modernness.
Yep. Yeah, it's a shame. But that's
Is there
what we
anything
live
that shows when they were made? Oh, sorry. Is there anything that shows when each one was made? The time? It's just interesting that there's some that have 4, 5, 6, and then there's some that have additional structures. I like how you proposed that they could be used for communication, because that is kind of what we do as we upgrade in technology. We realize, oh,
Right.
okay, like 4 points, that's the beginning, or 5, 6, maybe that's how they were advancing that race or whatever they were. They were learning and growing and realizing, oh, okay, if we make one more side to this or develop additional pieces that we could put on the ends, we can create a higher frequency or create a bigger barrier or whatever they were doing, you know?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at some of the ones that look like basically just, you know, four little in a center castle, and then all of a sudden you look at some of these other ones and it's a straight up octagon in the center floating in the middle of the water with 16 different whatever they're fucking called, and 3 layers of walls in the water. It's like, oh well, they upgraded, that's for sure.
It's funny
Yeah.
that we think that they were used for defense because that's what we're told, and that's what we would think as a society. But maybe there was a peaceful, you know, race back in the day that
Yeah.
weren't fighting. I'm not saying they were or weren't. I have no fucking clue. Like all of
No,
us.
that's a great point. You were assuming that everybody fought as much as we do
Yeah,
now.
because we were told
And-
that they
and-
fought back in the day, and everyone was
yeah.
at war all the time. They might not have been like that.
That's right. What did we learn in school? We always learned about the wars, right? We
Yeah.
never heard of any times of peace. It was always getting taught the wars. We were always a fighting people. Well, what if that wasn't the case? Exactly. What if we were at peace and the war only came when they decided they wanted to destroy all this stuff? That's a
Yeah,
great
when
point.
John D. Rockefeller was born and everything went to shit, and now here we are just warring all the, wars and rumors of war. That's Revelation, which they probably wrote that fucking book
Well,
too.
yeah,
Who
we're
knows?
taught that we're supposed to be like that so that we'll continue to be like that, and we'll teach our children to be like that, and they can, have that idea progress into future generations. But what if it wasn't like that at all? What if that was communication? I liked that in your little list of things. That's not something I would ever have thought of. I thought it was defense or even offense, whatever. I thought it was definitely something that would be for, calling it a fort in general makes me think military. But what if it was something completely different?
Yeah,
Like a
and
tower.
we
Like what if a radio tower was standing and everything else was killed except for, 10 people and they all repopulated the earth and found a couple, radio towers. They'd be like, "Oh my gosh, I wonder if people climbed up to this and shot people from far away and that was their, their point to their lookout point or whatever." I don't know.
What if under each of those star forts it's 5 times as big or 2 times as deep underground for a city way bigger, and that's just the tip of the iceberg? And well, as far as we know,
that's a good point, too.
all they did is fucking cover it up. They're like, nope, nothing to see here. It's just a fort on top that looks like a star.
They're like, "It's a pretty
Thousands
star,
of
look at
them.
the star." Nothing
yeah,
to see,
or they
walk
were
away.
from older time and they got flooded and they were just dug out, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
much like the World's Fair buildings. That's something I've considered as well, that these things were buried and they were dug out. And
Yeah.
this is what we see today, when in reality, this would have been, 60, 70, 80 feet above ground. And there would have been a lot less below ground. Yeah, that's a great point too, Ben.
All right. Hey, really quick, while we're here, before you move on, I have to go. I have an hour before I got to go to sleep. And unfortunately, in between there, I have to do laundry, call my kid, and take my pot gummies so that I can actually go to sleep. So thank you. That was not me. That was a sound clip.
That was Biden.
Matt, I just mentioned to Joe, I sent him a message and I said, whenever you get that deep dive done on these things, and you do more of the scientific research behind it and you kind of satisfy that itch, I would love to have you on during, like, if possible, a Sunday afternoon, so that we can actually take however much time we can get with you to get through everything. I know that I would love to stay on, but I can't tonight. So
we're gonna still be coming, giggity. We're still gonna be going because he's still got a bunch more slides. And
Right.
I'm sorry you always have to leave early. We appreciate you.
I love you.
We love
Thank
you.
you. And yeah, I was gonna say,
You
keep
know
the
that-
conversation going.
That sounds great, Ben. I'd definitely be interested, man.
To everybody in the chat, you guys are the best. Thank you guys for the conversation, for the questions and the input. To be completely honest, I do go back and generally reread all of the comments the next day, just in case I missed any. So to all of you guys, thank you very much. I will see you guys next time. Have a great evening.
Later, dude.
Piss.
All right, Matt, continue.
That
We
never
can
gets
edit
old,
this
by
later
the
for
way.
audio.
I could
I know.
listen to that all day.
Piss. Piss.
It's so good, and
Balls.
just all of it, so good. Okay. Anyway, enough of my stupidness. Continue. Jen
All
had
right.
to go to this too, so.
Yeah. Then we have these things called star long thinnies. Okay. And this is an interesting layout because it's just a long thin. Now, these tend to be either on an island itself or on a giant hill. And there's really no connection to water that we can tell. But you don't know what's underground and what kind of structure they have.
That's so funny. I saw that on the screen earlier, a star long thinny. I'm like, that sounds like something I say when I'm super hammered. I'm so glad you got to that.
Yeah. And it's not a typical, your typical star shape pattern, right? It's more of it does have the bastions here, and you do see the pointed walls around the perimeter, but for the most part, it doesn't follow the same shape as the other ones. And this one is called the Citadel de Bitch, which I also found kind of humorous.
Like actual bitch.
This one is the one that I wanted to show you guys because this one blows my mind. This is called Palma in Italy. And what you have here is essentially a star city, a city within the fort. Okay, and you have one layer of wall around the outside, and then you have another, some landscaping, then another layer of wall around the perimeter, and then another set of landscape and another giant star around the outside of that, which, this is one of the more impressive forts from a landscaping point of view, being that it is.
It looks like a mandala, whatever.
Yes. And it has another interesting connection I'll show you here in a second. But one of the other things I wanted to point out here, look at around it. See the fields and how they have all these different fields. These are all have some sort of canalway in them or some sort of irrigation system And you'll notice that there's dry fields, and then there's also the wet fields, which and they would do different things with each field depending on, you know, what kind of moisture was in them. So that's one of the things that I find real impressive too, is not only the fort itself, but they managed to use the fort to benefit the landscape around it. So again, tying into that giant network, it wasn't just a defensive fort. It definitely had more potential to it. And this is the same fort, and this is the one I was telling you about, Joe, before, with the 3 sets of walls, right? So this original set of walls in here was built in the 1500s, 1600s. Then you get to the second layer of wall out here, where that was born in the late 1600s. And then you go to the third level, which is out on the outer perimeter, and that was in the early 1800s. So they continually updated these things. Now, like Jen said before, was that an upgrade? You know, was that going from 4G to 5G, or was that because they had been attacked so much that they felt like they needed more defense? I don't know.
That one looks huge too. Like, how big is that one?
Oh, it's massive. The walls, Joe, on the outside are 45 feet high, to give you some perspective. So if you look at this drawing on the left here, it'll show you these things are about 45 feet high. And then you have all this structure on the inside. I mean, it's a massive complex.
Square footage or acreage or hectares? What are you, like, how big of a surface area is that?
That's a good question.
It looks fucking huge. It looks like a whole city in there.
Oh yeah, that's multiple acres for sure. I mean, we're talking that may even be close to a square mile.
I was gonna say, because you can kind of see these little buildings out at the sides, and
they're specks.
Just from the middle, it looks like it kind of looks like airplane hangars or something, but they look
Is that
very
a picture
small.
of like the I Ching, like below? What is that?
Yeah, that's just, it's the yin yang. Yeah, they're trying to show that how it resonates in a similar manner with the layout, right? You have the 8 sections around the outside perfectly laid out so that the energy would flow from the middle out. And that's what they were kind of getting at there. Another interesting
like the I Ching. Do you know what the I Ching is?
No.
Oh, it looks like
I do
that.
not.
Keep going though. I think
No,
that
go
is.
ahead.
No, it's keep talking about your thing.
It's a
We've
divination
interrupted
thing.
you.
She's a witch.
We've interrupted you a million times, so I really want you to do your thing. We'll talk about the I Ching another time.
One of the interesting pictures I found was comparing these two, and CERN is on the left, and you compare it to this Palma in Italy, and man, it looks pretty similar. So
interesting.
just one of those, just one of those one-offs you find along the way.
One of those
that makes it seem like it's technology, though, just a different kind. The people were a little like a different dimension, but we're in that dimension too. Just a different, a race. Wow.
The Stargate.
Yeah. That's
essentially, yeah. That's what you wonder. You look at some of these, and especially this one, because it has that hole in the middle, right? It has that octagonal or hexagonal shape in the middle that is almost like a center point. I don't know what it would be, but man. Then we get to these. These are interesting.
It's like mimicry,
Joe.
like Andy from Deep Share always talks about. There's CERN is like the mimicry of the natural system we used to use. So it's an inversion, a perversion of natural systems that work by themselves. And they're like, no, we're going to do it by smashing particles together.
Yep. The God particle, right? That's what they smashed. So what we have here, this is called a hedgehog. So what these are built, half of them are on the waterway, and they're built, this is what I was talking about before. If you look where the points are going, all the points are going back towards the landscape. They're not going towards the sea. And you'll actually see in this one, a star within a star. Down here in the lower left-hand corner is a smaller star, which could be the energy house for it, where they would contain
Starfort child.
Yeah. But then you look again and look around the perimeter, you have again the wall, then another layer of wall, and then you get out to the fields, and you see these fields out here that are in very distinct formations, and it's just fascinating.
That also looks like a very small city in there.
Yes. Oh yeah, without a doubt. And that's the point of it. It was basically a defensive around that, or, you know, to keep that city in. And then what they would find is there may be multiple of these along the coast. You know, and again, are they connection points? Is it just to benefit this one city? You know, that's where my next deeper dive into this is going to go, is how does it tie in with all the ley lines and everything like that. So here you have a megalopolis, which is basically a Manhattan sized star fort city. So they take the edge of an island. Over here is where you will start seeing some of the what's left of the defensive structure, but it's just a massive, massive area on the water and pretty precisely laid out. And this is Malta. The whole island of Malta there is, you know, basically one giant star fort.
Why did we not hear about any of this in school? Look at these pictures. Like,
Because they don't know what the fuck it is. That's
Yeah.
why.
You think they'd
They
feed
have
us some
no reason.
bullshit at least?
Yeah,
And it's
that's
kind of
true.
like one of those out of sight, out of mind, Joe. So if you don't know about it, you're never going to find out about it. Why would you ever, you know, pre-internet, why would you ever look into these things, or where would you ever come across them unless you're really deep diving into books?
Until there was Google Earth and you're looking down and you're like,
This is bullshit!
You can't see them with the naked eye, though. So you can't just walk around and say, hey, what's this? And question it, because you wouldn't see the star fort as it is. You'd have to be above. And unless everyone's flying around all the time looking down, you know, as
Yeah.
children questioning, it's not like you can go up to a tree and say, what's this? And have, you know, your teacher have to explain that to you. You can't just do that with a star fort. That's probably
So
why they're
crazy.
like, that'll be easy to just brush under the rug.
Yeah, we'll just cover it up, you know.
Mhm.
there's
It's
just
a lot
cannons.
easier.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we get into the standalone cities, which is essentially, you know, a ring city that is protected by a wall, or two or three. These star cities and standalone cities are always tied in with water. There's a waterway either directly outside that they can canal into it, or they have one that runs right through it. But they all utilize water. And we'll see, I'll give you a bunch of examples here. This one's a split star city, which some would say, you know, may have at one time been one giant star city on either side of the canal. So if you could imagine all of this being connected here in one, and then, you know, they either canaled it in, or due to some destruction, they were forced to break it up into multiple pieces. And you'll see there's a variety of those around the world. And then this is the field system we were talking about before. I mean, you look at it and it's just mind boggling. It's all these fields of, you know, there's canals in there. And it was, you know, they worked in conjunction with the canals and the structures themselves, whether it's an auxiliary building on the outside of the star fort. But they kind of hung their hat on these field systems. This was one of their big achievements.
Well, it'd kind of have to be if they're, you know, if that was agriculture based, they'd have to figure out how to make this work to fucking eat.
Yeah,
not
and
going to
one of the
supermarket.
things I wondered about this is this part of the power system, right? Since there's so much canal in there, and you look at it, it almost looks like a, you know, like some sort of chip system. Are these, you know, landscapes working together to help magnify what's coming out of the star fort? Don't know.
Or the cathedrals or whatever else.
Yeah,
All those
whatever.
arches, man, the arches.
Yep. I mean, you just look at some of these things and they're just really mind blowing. It kind of looks like somebody blew over a timber pile, but they all have a purpose from what we're told. Now, the other interesting thing are these auxiliary structures, which are structures that are outside of the star fort, and they're not associated directly with it. So you would have a star fort, and then, you know, at a distance, you would have these almost like a checkpoint, something like that. And they would, you know, they may be used to help integrate with crops. It may be just a point that they laid out where they would house supplies. They could house people, but they always were interconnected with the canals, which is something that's pretty interesting. And they're usually a lot less complex than the star fort itself. And they don't tend to have a star pattern. They tend to be you know, either rectangles. Some of them have, you'll see one there that kind of, or a couple there that kind of look like a pentagon. But for the most part, they don't have any rhyme or reason as to the shape that we are aware of yet. The canal systems, obviously, those are intricate to these. They were not only used for transport and moving goods or moving people, but they were a great way to irrigate the fields and, potentially use energy, move energy, harness energy in these star forts.
And there's even star-shaped fort looking shit. Like it looks like the edge of a star fort right there, and it
Yep.
apparently maybe just an irrigation canal. I don't know.
Oh no, that probably was part of one at one time. This is a pretty modern picture. And yeah, I would imagine that this was this star fort would have continued out, in multiple directions, because you can see it goes here and then it just cuts off and they put something here. I can't tell from the picture what this is, but then you have a building right over here, like a big, almost like a manufacturing building or warehouse or something like that. Let's see. Yeah, some more examples of canal systems. I mean, you just look at it and they're definitely very intricately designed. Just another example of a star city. Again, you look at this one's in the water, in the middle of the water, which again, talking about what we talked about before, I think Jen and Ben kind of nailed it. They probably dug, had this, there was a larger canal or waterway on one side that they might have dammed up, built what they needed to build, and then let the water come back in. Yeah, just another star fort. I kind of want to get through these. I want to get to the cymatic part here. The gardens, that was another thing. And some of these had exquisite gardens, especially in some of the French and Belgian and Netherlands. They're known for having these exquisite gardens. Some of them were inside of the walls. Most of them tended to be outside, directly in the direct vicinity outside the walls. These ones are more showing them inside. I'll give you a couple of examples of them. I mean, these are just anywhere that you see the dark is where they're growing some sort of vegetation. And it's just an intricate layout. And this one, actually, if you start mapping it out, I was playing around with it the other day. It has a similar layout to DC. And you'll see.
I was just going to say that. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
you
looks
have
like
the square and
yeah.
compass over here. You have the cross over here, which would be, this would kind of be either the White House would be your point here, and we would go out and you'd have the Capitol and Lincoln Memorial, Washington, or the Jefferson Monument, whatever, they all line up. So yeah, this one I found interesting, and I definitely want, that's Versailles. I want to dig into that one a little much. And if you think about it, Versailles is known for Masons, so.
Huh.
So what if, this is super random, our listeners will probably hate this. So what if whatever race was before us, I'm sorry, but I just don't think we as people were in existence when all this was happening. I just don't. So whatever was there, they just got a group of, maybe they're a little similar from us. We might be descendants of them, though, for example. Whatever was there, they said, okay, we're going to plan this next little culture, because I think we're a project. I think we are maybe in a simulation, but we might be a biological simulation, something you'd watch from above, like an ant farm or something like that.
Yep.
Whatever. But so what if they all drew out little maps of how they should plot out the world? So it would be the same as getting doing like groupthink now, in a business, but getting, 20 of those things together and saying, okay, draw out your best thing on this realm that we have and let me see what you got. And so they all got a little corner of this world and they got to plan it all out. And whoever won, I don't know, got to plan the world, and the rest of it just kind of fell apart or whatever. I don't know. But it's interesting that there's so many that look similar, but they weren't really effective. They didn't do anything, But then this that looks just like Washington, D.C. got to be used. Maybe that was the winner. And his little blueprint got to be used all over the world.
Basically, which iOS version are we?
Yes.
Maybe it was like the reality shows of the previous race. I don't know.
Could be.
Not really like reality shows, but maybe they all got together and thought, okay, how can we do this best? Let's get creative. They might not be so robotic as we think,
Or this was already laid out like this and we just landed on it, right? I mean, that's the other thing, like DC, you know,
Totally.
they say some of those buildings could be a lot older and that the White House might have been there and, you know, the cornerstone and all that stuff was just photoshopped, but you know, there's conspiracy rumors, whatever you want to call it, alternate theories. But I like that one. Yeah, I think anything's possible with these people because it's all about control, right, Jen? I mean, that's what it boils down to. And if they can find a way to control it, manipulate it, they're going to do it.
Yeah, I don't know if they're so they might not be so evil, I guess. I don't think that the world we live in is great right now, but they might just be indifferent, and that's a little bit scary as well. They
Oh
just might
yeah.
not care. It would be like watching an ant farm where you don't really care which ant lives or dies. You're just kind of like, okay, you just kind of want the whole thing as a whole to survive.
Yep.
That's it. Anyway, keep going. Let's see these.
Oh, here's one. This is Fort Mchenry in Baltimore. And this is actually where the national anthem was wrote during the Battle of Baltimore in 1812. And this one is still in existence today. It's absolute beautiful, you know, beautiful star fort. Just an example that one was supposedly built in 1798. Just to give you an idea. And there's nothing there. This is one I was talking about before where you have, and this is just an artist rendition, obviously, but you would have the fort itself and then have the waterway running through it to, you know, magnetize whatever you want to, however you want to electrify, however you want to term it.
I think that's what the media shows COVID-19 as.
Basically,
The
yeah,
coronavirus.
that is the COVID logo right there.
It's the coronavirus, you
Just
guys.
color it green,
It is.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you're just seeing some of these examples of some of these different forts. I mean, they're just amazing layouts. This one here in Netherlands is you know, the typical star right on the port. There's one way to get a ship in. You know, you have the beautiful city in the middle, the defensive on the outside, and then the fields immediately around the perimeter. Now we'll get a little quick look at where the star forts are. And this is what I was talking about before. You'll see the majority of them on the East Coast, likely defending from French and Spanish ships. But why nothing on the West Coast other than the fact that supposedly we weren't there yet? That's the only thing I can think of really, because I would think you would probably build up the West Coast just as much as the East Coast. Although it is a much longer trip from, you know, coming from Asia this way than it is coming from Europe and Africa west.
Well, apparently, when I was listening to your 3.5 hour fucking epic show today, that might not have been much of a problem if they had airships or whatever else. You know, you were talking about the Chinese anchors found in the Gulf somewhere.
Yeah, they were down here in the Gulf of Mexico. He said right around here, right around the boot of Texas.
Chinese anchors. Like what?
Wow.
Yeah. Which means they would have had to go on. They're not cutting across Mexico here. They would have had to go on all the way around South America and come up, you know, and came in there. And yeah, so they're finding Chinese anchors around the coast of Texas. So yeah, that may, and Canada, basically same thing. They're protecting their eastern front. Now here's France, and if you look at the French ones, it's you know, it's basically just outlining their border. Now, was that to keep people out, or was that to harness the energy and whatever frequency and keep it in? That's, you know, TBD basically.
Yeah.
The ones that are inland, are they close to water? I'm so sorry.
Yes, yeah, all of these are close to water.
Because the ones that are inland don't look close to water because we're zoomed out on the map, obviously, but almost everyone, even the ones in the United States, are all on the coast.
Yeah, and here too, this is a really bad illustration because all this is showing is around the perimeter. There were at least at one time 700 to 800 star forts in France alone.
Oh wow, okay.
Wow.
So
the sheer number is mind-boggling to me that there's that many all over the world, and I heard about them like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Like what the fuck?
Yeah, it is. It's really mind-blowing. And they're in your backyard. I mean, everybody basically, you're within a couple hour drive, unless you're, you know, dead in the Midwest. I guarantee you're within a couple hour drive of going to one.
There's one in California, according to your map. I would
know,
love
I
to
was
looking at
go.
that.
Yeah.
There's
We're gonna have to
actually a
check it out.
couple in California that they're finding more and more of them on Google Earth. They're finding, remnants of them, not full forts, but remnants. These are just different countries. It doesn't really matter. Spain was another interesting one, just because, and again, the number is drastically underestimated in this graph because they had a lot more than the dozen or so they show here. But one of the things I found interesting is they have a heavy presence on the French border. So it was almost like they were trying to keep something out of France, and keeping in. And then they obviously had them down on the Strait of Gibraltar to control that area, which would make sense. And then Barcelona, which is, one of their big cities. So that would make sense also. And then we look over here.
At the time that these were built, I'm so sorry. At the time that these were built, were these countries already established as countries? I don't know country history at all. I'm the worst.
Me either.
So I'm just curious as far
For the
as
most
when.
for the most part, yeah, because we're talking
Okay.
the 1600s here. So the major countries would have been around for a while at this point.
Okay.
And then you see over here, Palma. This is that island we were talking about. That's basically one giant star fort over in Spain.
Wow.
The UK, again, to that I find interesting, they weren't trying to protect from what would be any Russian or Norwegian advance from this side. Their main defense, again, was down around, or if you're thinking defense, is around the French side. Now, if you're thinking energy, that would make sense because all the French ones are right around the border down below. So that would make a good connection there to be able to transmit. And then you'll see it on the coast of Ireland as well. So, and Scotland even had a couple in the northern UK.
It's weird to me that worldwide they would build these things basically the same. Like you said, there's
Yeah.
difference. There's 4, 5, 6, whatever pointed. There's some that are fucking crazy Mandela looking things, but everybody was building these things apparently at the same time.
They look
So-
so different, though. That's what makes me think that it was tasked to a group of people who weren't connected. There wasn't a blueprint for, okay, we're going to do this. They were like,
yeah, so look right here.
your
This
best
is a perfect
shot.
example. Yeah, these are the ones these are some of the ones built in the 1850s in the US, and there's really no rhyme or reason to it, right? You'll get some like this, that's a pentagon. You get this one's the actual star, 5-pointed star. In Fort Warren, Fort Robideau is a 4-pointed star. Fort Stevens actually looks like just one of those Ravenels, right? It's just kind of almost looks like an outpost there. And then we get down into some of the more exquisite one. There's Castillo De San Marcos, Fort Monroe, Fort Stanwix. That's another one up in New York State. That's a pretty big one. But like you said, yeah, there's no rhyme or reason to it, but there is, everybody has their own little way of doing it. But they tend to follow some sort of geometric shape, geometric function. And if you put sacred geometry up to a lot of these, it works, it fits in perfectly. I don't know if you've ever seen that where they put it almost looks like a hermit crab shell. And it has the spiral going out of it. And if you form it up against some of these structures, they fit perfectly into that, which would mean they're in harmony. Now we get to the fun part. This is where we get into thinking outside the box and starting to look at the magnetic fields and auras and frequencies and things like that. And we know that frequencies have an effect on us because we're mostly water, right? Not only physically, but mentally. So whoever built these things, and we've been saying this all along, whether it's the churches, the cathedrals, the pipe organs, right, star forts, they knew this and they knew how to utilize it. So how did they do that? They would use geomancy, which is, using the land, terra firma, right? They would use harmonics, specialized layouts, right? And are they doing it to get an emotional response? Are they doing it for electric or magnetic purposes? Or, or was the energy gathered at these things and then made available elsewhere? That's kind of, if we were looking at this from an energy perspective, it's much harder to find answers. So you kind of have to formulate questions and then work backwards into it. So we get into sound, right? Sound is vibration in the ether. Vibrations.
Mathematics. I love this shit.
Yes, and the vibrations affect everything, all the magnetic fields they can reach, and including us. So you get the different frequencies have different effects on our bodies and our minds, right? You have good vibes and bad vibes. And so what cymatics does, it shows us the geometrical shapes and the different magnetic fields and when they're exposed to vibrations or frequencies. So if you think about it that way, the star fort shapes could have the beneficial effects of this to the area when they're exposed to the right frequency and or vibrations. And so it could be sound based. We talk about direct energy weapons. Well, what if they weren't used as weapons, but they were used to benefit us? And that's where we're going along this line, being that they're around the water. And then if you look at why does it say that's an error right there? It should say moto. You had
What's wrong with you, dude? I expect perfection.
Because that's one of the studies, right? It's the famous Japanese gentleman Emoto who did the study with water, and he would talk to water, or he would say things to water, or produce different frequencies to water, and the water would take different sacred geometrical shapes.
Oh, under a microscope. Yeah. I just heard about that the other day. Maybe it was you talking about it.
And I'll show you some examples here in a second. And one of the things that we're going to look at real quick is an oscillator, right? And an oscillator, and we'll go here, it's basically a device that produces alternate current, right? Whether it's radio frequency or audio frequency. All right. So we'll take a look at this real quick and look at the different shapes. What do they look like?
Star forts.
Yeah. Right. So using an oscillator, using different radio frequencies or audio frequencies, you are getting shapes that are star forts, over and over again.
What frequencies are these at? Are they very high or are they very low? Because I heard
this one is just variable.
Yeah, this one is a variety right there. But if we go down, let me get off that. And we'll go
I just
down.
remember hearing the very low frequencies when you're doing cymatics with sand, that they aren't as cool. They're not as intricate as when you're doing a very high frequency. It makes these crazy.
So you want?
Oh, there you go.
And where is it? Hold on, right here.
Oh shit! You're blowing our minds. All right.
So here we go. Here, you guys can just watch this. And if you're listening, I apologize because I'm not going to explain each and every frequency, but this is going to play the different frequencies for us and show you what kind of shapes you'll get.
And if you're on audio, you're missing out. You got to check out the video.
All right, let me get. All right. All right, let's get to it. Come on. Here we go. So that's at 345. I'm just going to add some more and change the frequency here to 1033. And you get a whole different shape.
That is nuts. 1820.
It's really just amazing.
How high do they go up on this?
Let's see.
Snowflake level.
Yeah, it'll go. I think it's over 5,000. Let's see. Getting up to 4,200. And you look, and they're all geometric patterns, right? Over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
The next couple are really cool. Check this one out.
That's why the new agers are always like, raise your vibration. It's like, how do we do that? I would love to become this fucking awesome shape.
Yeah.
I'm bored with my human shape.
You start getting into some of these vibrations, and it's just, you see the different harmonics. And actually, that's good enough on that one. Let me show you one more quick video here. And this is the sound of architecture.
What you're looking at right now is not CGI or computer animation. It is simply a bowl of water with sound playing beneath it. Cymatics is the science of revealing the architecture of sound. Here we have sand on a metal plate, and if you change the frequency of the sound, you can see complex patterns forming. Zooming in even closer on these patterns, you can see what looks like galaxies. The Sufi mystic Hazrat Inayat Khan said, "Divine sound is the cause of all manifestation." The knower of the mystery of sound knows the mystery of the whole universe. It has also been said that sound is architecture frozen in time. So you may want to ask yourself, what type of invisible architecture are you embedding into your subconscious with the music that you listen to? I want you to really, really think about this.
So that's really interesting, because if you think about it, you know, we're supposed to listen to music at 432 hertz, and they changed it to 440 for the A tone in you know, the Rockefellers co-opted that, and then along with the Nazis, because it makes your body out of balance. And this is some of the, that's not the one. Where's the other one? There is one here where these are just different cymatic frequencies. These are the frequencies of the planets over here. So if you look at those, I found that really interesting. I did not know that they had different tunes for each planet, which would make sense if they're plasma, but who knows?
Yeah, it was like on that documentary that we bring up all the time.
Oh,
Yes.
they look like snowflakes. It's pretty
Yeah.
show
weird.
it looks like sound in
And this
water.
one, the moon looks like Corona. And that's what I found interesting. I was like, oh man, the moon.
Oh,
It all goes back to the moon, or Earth, even Earth itself. But Earth at least has the
Yeah.
star in the middle. That looks kind of cool. But and then if you look at those compared to the rose windows and cathedrals, now we're starting to make some connections that, you know, and we know that the cathedral windows had significant impact and on frequency and emitting frequency, especially before they put the glass in, that they were basically giant resonators. So you're starting to see the connection here and the shapes, right? A lot of these shapes you will see in the star forts, whether it's in the interior or the perimeter, which, you know, and this is what we were talking about before. So with Emoto, the different words that he would say, you know, he would say, I cannot, and he gets a broken water
weird.
molecule. He says, I can, and he gets the snowflake, a perfect snowflake. I love you is even more, you know, dense and connected. And then when he says
Oh, yeah.
stupid, it's just a mess, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so it's very fascinating how, you know, sound and tone can impact the shape of water, which then in turn can affect what's around you. So now if you equate these to the star forts and start looking at them, you start seeing, wow, okay, maybe there is something to this, because they do have not only the water source, but they have the cymatic layout, the sacred geometrical layout.
It would be interesting if he did that with people who spoke different languages and had the same intention with their words, you know,
Well, he
because
did
I
it in
guess,
Japanese as well as English.
and it produced the exact same shape each time.
I don't know if he got the same results from the standpoint that it was producing the positive versus negative.
Yeah, I wonder if it was the intention too. I mean, there is something to the tone of the word. Don't get me wrong. I know there is something to that, but the intention that you project as a human as well, that's another interesting
And
thing.
it may be the creation of the word too, Jen, right? It may just be the way the word is set. Like no could be just a negative, you know,
Because you have that intention though when you say it. You're like, no.
Yeah.
But when you say I love you in multiple different languages, it sounds very different. So there has to be something that would create that shape and have it be the same, because the words aren't the same. But the
Well, and
intention
they've done experiments with that too, where they've done it like to dogs and stuff, where they'll say, I love you in an angry tone, and the dog won't come to them, right?
Oh.
Because he can tell from the inflection that, no, you don't mean well. I've heard those words before, but by your tone or inflection, I'm not coming. No way. Let me see. Yeah, these are just some more examples of the cymatics and the layout of it. It's just really, and this is the one you were talking about before, Ben was talking about, which is St.
Oh, yeah.
Augustine. And that's one where you'll notice, right? You got the moat around the outside. It's the perfect star. This would be more of a, you know, internal. It's not a massive scale layout.
That's a basic bitch star fort. Like what were
Oh,
they even
yeah.
doing?
That's basically an outpost, right? And that, honestly, that's probably the tip of a larger structure, or there was a larger structure in the general vicinity, and this is one of those auxiliary buildings.
Or if it's communication, this was like Windows 95.
Yeah. Yeah.
How dare you bring up Bill Gates?
And this
This
is
is
that same
family
one we were
show.
looking at before in Portugal, just a further view back. And if you look at it, I mean, it's just breathtaking because they go all the way up this hill and then there's steps within the hill. I mean, this is just such an intricate design on top of a hill with, I mean, they do have one roadway here you can see in the back that gets up to it. But I mean, you're talking, that's a steep hill, tall hill, and they built this massive fort on top. Just amazing. And then you can't have America without your Statue of Liberty being on top of a star fort.
Shit. I didn't even know that one. Damn.
Yep.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, she is on top of a star fort, and there are multiple layers underneath her as well. Just, these are some more examples. Star cities. Again, it's just a confined city within the fort. You can all look these up. There's nothing really that amazing about them. I mean, there is, but nothing after what we've talked about. It's nothing mind-blowing. Yeah, and these are just some more examples. And that's, these ones are the ones that are interesting where they're all the way in the water. And again, going back to what Ben and Jen said, that, they probably built these and then released the dam and let the water come in. But to have the entire facility surrounded by water as an island star, I find those ones pretty fascinating. Especially this one in
Holy shit.
Germany. Yeah, look
Wow.
at this one in Germany. Not only do they have the islands, but then they also built all these little ramparts on the outside as well, the little Ravenels, and they have another bastion on the side here. It's just really fascinating. I mean, this one too, look at the intricacy of the layout. And getting back to what we talked about before, the points aren't pointing out towards the waterway, which if these were defensive, right, and you were trying to use energy to defend this, you would have those points pointing out if they were energy bearers. But if they're going back towards the land, they're probably feeding the land, whatever frequency or whatever is being emitted from this. Yeah, and this is the last one here. This is kind of an interesting one because here's the ruins of an ancient star fort that have just been buried over. And then you have, these were probably working in conjunction with each other. They decided to keep this one. And you can even still see the geometric pattern. You can see the rings with the way the city is built out from the center point. And then you have, the perfect lines that cut it in half in every direction. So the intricacy of the layout is just, it's really mind-blowing.
Yeah, and they did that with donkeys. We know this.
Yeah.
And it was to protect against cannon fire. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know.
Dude.
I'll give you this one real quick. This one's kind of interesting. There's this guy named Phil Callahan, and Ireland has these things called round towers. Okay. And they're basically, they look like silos and they're all over the place. And you really, they used to say, they were water towers or they were, silos, storage. But as they start looking into it more and more, they find that these towers may have been designed as like resonators or some sort of collecting for magnetic wavelengths or electromagnetic energy from the ether. And what this gentleman, Professor Callahan, did is he started studying the towers and what they were made of and different substances. But what he found is overall, they were all very conductive when it came to magnets. So, let me just go to this one first. So you look and he goes, although the clay granules did not stick to the magnet, he found that the round tower that had clay around the outside was attracted to the magnet. So based on this, he determined that the rounds, they would resonate about 14.5-meter wavelengths coming from the night sky. So these things were like receptors, basically. And one of the interesting things is if you look at the layout of them in Ireland, so here's the layout over here, right? One of the patterns of them, it ties almost directly to the constellation of Draco, which is,
What the fuck?
Wow.
yeah. I mean, it's, you go follow the tail up and you get to the head. And then you can look at even some of these other structures or other constellations over here. There was a start of it. Now, some of the towers may have been destroyed or demolished by now, but you can also see some connections to these other stars in the sky, which I found to be pretty fascinating. And
You got to mention too that all these fucking towers, the round towers, the obelisks, everything are all phallic shaped too.
Penis.
You know what I mean?
Can't go without a good penis. And
I'm gonna take that.
They also are, they resemble like the chambers of the Pyramid of Giza, right? With the way that they harness the energy and can. He believes that the structures were like anti-gravity structures. I don't know if I go that far, but he said that the priest could levitate in some of these things, which I found pretty weird. But this little diagram here is what I found interesting, is how the stone antenna basically would absorb the rays from the sun, allowing the other rays to go to the vegetation in the area. And what they would find is that around these stone antennas, you would get massive amounts of vegetation for the way that it was using the magnoelectric monopoles. Again, I'm using these big words that I don't totally understand, but I understand the schematics. Yeah. But what it's basically saying is that it's taking the sun's energy, it's being able to harness it and then redistribute it in a manner that truly benefits the environment around it, which, you try and you get the narrative as to what these stone towers are, or these buildings are, or the star forts are. And then you look at some of the science behind it, and there are some connections to alternate theories. And that's where we're trying to go with these star forts. So
yeah, it does though. That's the mind-blowing thing is when you're fighting, I send you a screenshot of somebody on Instagram, button heads, and I'm like, dude, sick them, go get them. Because I don't know enough about this. Like, you've done the research, but for somebody to come at you with a MSM response, it was for cannon fire, duh, you stupid. I can't even deal with that. They haven't sat through 2 hours or 8 hours or 5 hours, whatever, thing you're looking at. They haven't sat through that. Clearly, they've listened to 5 minutes of CNN going, no, it's this in 3 words. Go about your day. That's not good enough. Sorry.
Well, yeah, it's just the narrative, right? They're just reading all the narrative materials. And that's the problem with a lot of these people is, and, I laugh because I feel like that's how Brian Callen is on the show he does with Sam.
Yeah.
And, they go back and forth, and he always goes back to, well, why isn't this in a book? Why isn't this in that book?
Yeah.
And there are books out there, but nobody will read them. And when you do bring up a book, they're like, oh, well, that guy has no credit. He's discredited. He's not an Oxford scholar. Well, why can't you or I go out there and do our research, field research, and bring it back and write a book and say, here's what I found. And that's automatically discredited because it's not part of the narrative.
I'm waiting for do your own research to become racist, white supremacist, anti-vaxxer.
It won't be allowed at all.
It's like,
they're going to start burning books like
it's like the old, what was it? You can't code was like racist or whatever,
learn to code. Yeah,
learn to code. There you go. That's what do your own research is going to become. I mean, and you've already seen it though, in the mainstream media, they've said that doing your own research is a detriment to your health. Like, I mean, come on. Can you be any more obvious?
But go get this stabby jab. That'll be great.
Oh, yeah. Make sure you inject yourself, fill yourself with poison, load up.
It'll make you stop questioning the narrative.
Why are you even thinking on your own? That's what they're trying to make. They're trying to dumb us down. They've done it for a long time. If you really think of what they've blasted into the media, and I'm sure none of us have paid attention to it. I mean, we've seen it here and there, but all the dumb reality shows. I did make a joke earlier about a giant race having a reality show trying to design this earth. But but that's what they're trying to fill our heads with. They're like, oh, look at this fashion trend in Paris this week. That's what you should be wearing. And look at what everyone's doing. You should be doing that too. Look at Scary Mommy and everything that's trending on social media. And if you don't do that, you're a fucking idiot. And So they're
yeah.
just gonna be like, well, why are you thinking for yourself instead of watching the media? You're fucking dumb.
I welcome the next reset. Come soon, Lord Jesus
Yeah.
or
No,
meteor,
I
whatever.
don't. I don't want the next reset. We can
Well-
reset ourselves in our own way.
Yeah, exactly.
Our-
Well, and the reason why we are where we are right now from a media standpoint is in 2012 they the Smith Modernization Act was disbanded, which means it was legal. It is now legal for our media to spread propaganda
Oh,
against
propaganda. Yeah, Obama did that.
Dude,
Thanks.
our
dude.
second episode of this show was with Charlie Robinson talking about that exact thing. It's wild.
And that's
That's
why
so
we're in hyperspeed right now, because they have there's nothing to keep them in check. They can put out there whatever they want for as far as bullshit, and we're seeing it on a daily basis now. And that's why we are where we are, because the media is allowed to lie to our face.
Yeah,
and
and
there's
we
nothing we
thought
can
we
do
were
about it.
so smart. That's what. I'm sorry. I do have a. I want to have faith so bad in our race, but people think, oh, I would never get tricked by that. It would never happen to me. That's a big thing with individuals. I wouldn't get tricked by that. I would definitely know if the government was trying to fool me. Yet then they're like, did you get your booster today?
Yeah, but what they don't understand is they don't understand that in order to get to that point where you have to make that decision, they are going to put you through so much trauma that you didn't even realize you got to that point where you had to make that decision. Right. And that's where we're at now. People have gone through 18, 20 months of just straight trauma and psychological operations to the point where they're not thinking the same as they were 2 years ago. And that's part of the genius of this plan that they've put together. The evil genius of it is that they've been able to work their psychological operation and break people down slowly, not immediately. It wasn't coming in and just killing your
You're
whole
right.
family. It was death by a million cuts.
It's
No, you're right.
the overused
Absolutely.
cliche of the frog in the boiling water. It's oh well, some of us did not even notice, and now they're boiling, and we're looking at them from outside the pan.
We
going,
flipped right at the
"Whoa."
last minute. I mean, we weren't necessarily buying into any sort of narrative. We were actually in an advantageous position of being like, what's going on? But also not being committed to one side or the other. So that's great. We also weren't dependent on what the government had to say. That was another great thing. But people who were a little bit scared just immediately just dove into that side. I think that there are people who are coming out of that, though. I was saying this on a show a couple days ago. I think there are people who are coming back, crawling back up from that abyss they dove into by mistake, and like asking for forgiveness. Like, sorry, I got my vax, but I still kind of don't care about Biden, and I just want to be healthy and happy with everyone else. I think people are coming together a little bit more, but it's sad that I think the media is doing a bad job. I don't care what anyone says. If you think the media is doing a great job, fuck you. People are waking up now all over the place. Look at our community. It's blowing up because the media is sucking. Yeah, some people are going to fall into it and they're going to blast that all over the media, but that is not what's happening across the country. Sorry. And
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, it's one of those where they're doing such a bad job, they're doing a good job, right? They're being so blatant that
it depends on your perspective. You're right.
They're playing to their audience.
But you're getting people now, like you were saying though, Jen, that did take it initially, but they're like, there's no way in hell I'm taking a booster, a third or fourth booster. I did my part by giving you your 2 because I thought I was doing my job to help everybody else and to get us out of this situation. And now they're realizing, no, it's not going to take 2 to get you out. It's never ending. And they're like, whoa, I didn't sign up for this. And that's where you're starting to see people wake up. And even out here where I'm in zombie land, we got colleges all over the place. I saw a lady eating dinner last night. She would take off her mask to take a bite, shove it in her pocket, and then take it right back out when she was chewing and put it back on. And I'm like,
so sanitary.
And my son he goes, Dad, what's wrong with that lady? I go, dude, I don't know. I'm like, she's been brainwashed. There's nothing I can tell you that makes any sense. He's like, why is she wearing a mask at the table? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, now
your son said that?
Oh yeah, he hates
Good for
masks.
him.
So
our kids do too, but it's cool because I know where you live, and that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't wear them anywhere. Like when we go out together, the only place he wears it is school because he has to. And even then he wears it down below his nose and gets yelled at 20 times a day. But
Yeah,
when
That's
we go
cool.
out, to places, we don't wear them. Nobody says anything to us. And it is what it is. And I think it's a
Because
lot.
people are waking up, though.
Yeah.
People are just kind of learning, like, oh, you know what? I don't think these do anything. It's still okay if you're sick. Sicknesses are real. I'm not saying all sicknesses are fake. Sickness is real. If you don't feel good, stay the fuck home. Definitely stay away from me, but don't be afraid that you're going to die. But if you do feel kind of off, yeah, sure, talk to your doctor. Let's all just use logic, basic logic, when we feel a certain way instead of listening to what Fauci and the media is telling us about having a sniffle or maybe not being able to taste when we have a cold, because that's always been a thing. I'm not sure if the Mandela effect has affected certain people, but every time I've had a cold since I was a baby, I couldn't taste anything,
Food
or
tastes like
since I could
shit or
remember.
nothing, right?
It would
Yeah.
taste like nothing, nothing at all. And that's fine, because that's how sickness works. When you can't smell, you can't taste. I was taught that in school. I don't know if that's a Mandela effect thing, but I was taught if you can't smell, if your nose is blocked up, you can't taste. So that's why you don't have an appetite when you're sick. Pretty normal. Not
Yeah.
really a big deal at all. Once you get better, you can smell and taste again. So anyway,
No, basically every time we go out anywhere outside of our house, I try to tell my kids that
This is bullshit!
all of it, and then I follow it with a real quick
Piss.
Penis.
Balls!
all of it. I give them all
he
of
doesn't
it.
say penis and balls to our kids. That doesn't happen.
Not normally, not on a normal day. But
Not on
Matt,
any
thank you for joining us. Thank everybody in the stream. Oh my God, you guys are fucking coming out in droves tonight.
Aw, thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
it. Thanks for all the
Yeah.
tips.
Thank you guys.
buddy.
Appreciate
I
it.
can't get to all the comments and pay attention to Matt's amazing face. So, it's
No, thank
it's
you.
a give and take.
I love hearing about history because, like I was saying mid-show, I hated history my whole life. I hated it. I thought it was boring and dumb and pointless. And maybe that's because there's a part of me that knows it's all fucking fake. I
No,
like
well,
to think that.
do you know why,
I
Jen?
think it was boring.
I'm a big history guy and I always kind of have been, but I hated history in school because they teach you the most pointless shit and they teach you the most uninteresting stuff to make you think that, oh, you don't want to get into this. You don't want to look into it anymore. You want to get through your class and that's it and move on.
Get out.
Whereas if they taught us about this stuff, how many people you think would have went, oh man, I'd love to go visit star forts and go research them and find out.
You're right. You're totally right. They do make history boring on purpose for for certain people, I guess.
Yeah.
Also, were you born and raised where you live right now?
No, I was born in New Jersey, basically raised in Connecticut and moved up here last year.
All right, fair enough. So East Coast, same. History there is really boring because it's very prominent. Like they talk about like pilgrims and the Virginia colonies and stuff. And you go there on field trips. It's so boring and it's every year. So it's just ingrained in your head constantly as a child. And it's churning butter and milking fucking cows.
Making
It's
you go look at Mark Twain's house, his log cabin. How exciting is that? I mean,
Right.
there's nothing in there. It smells like shit. There's these ladies dressed funny. It's like I try to get kicked out of field trips.
Right? Yeah, so it's terrible. So I never enjoyed it, but if you're totally right. If field trips were looking at star forts and looking at interesting things that we're not really taught about all the time, I think a lot more kids would be interested in history. And I also think that they would be kind of nervous about that.
Yes. And that's why we got to listen to podcasts because there's so many great people that put this stuff out there in an interesting manner. And that's what got me back into it was listening to other people talk about it. And man, there's so much interesting stuff out there that we haven't even touched the surface of.
Oh,
as a race, as a human race, we haven't even hit, and we're starting to slowly unlock things, and pretty soon the floodgates are going to open, and it's going to be an interesting time for sure because they're going to have their hands full when the truth starts coming out.
I know I'm nervous for that too, though, because we have children and lives and stuff. When the
I'm with you.
floodgates open, I don't think it's going to be like everyone who's lying and bad is just going to die. Like, no, I think we'll feel the effects of that as well, and it won't be great. Even though it will be a positive outcome overall, there will be negative effects felt by us.
In order
I'm
to
not
see the
trying-
light, you got to go through the dark a little
Yeah,
bit, you know.
yep,
But it's
you're
gonna
right,
be
yeah.
it'll be worth it. It's like growing pains, you know. You got to pull the band-aid off sometime because you got to let the cut heal. And we're at a point where we need to heal and we need to go in a different direction because where we're going right now ends in a bad way.
Yep. Very well said, Matt. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so
Great
much.
Deception Podcast on Instagram. Anywhere you get podcasts, he is available. He'll probably be on Rockfin soon. He's also on Alt Media United. But
Yes.
Oh, Media
Until
United
next
is the
time.
best.
I'm
Like,
so
hell
stoked.
yeah, good for you, dude. That's awesome.
yeah, he mentioned that at the beginning.
I know. That's badass. I wanted to bring it up again because that's fucking sweet.
Awesome. But until next time, because we're gonna have you back again, and you do the research and bring it to us, and then we'll put it up.
My
That-
pleasure. Yeah. No, I honestly I love doing this stuff, guys. So it's not even work. It's like just finding the time to be able to do it, trying to work and manage my son and
Exactly.
have a little bit of a social life. It's like, but man, this stuff's amazing. And yeah, next time I got something good, you will be the first to get it.
Fuck yeah.
Thank you.
All right,
Stick
guys.
around after we stop.
Thanks for listening. Thank you in the chat. We will catch you guys next time.